Excited to have this discussion tonight with Betty Simons. She is an incredible private investigator and she specializes in locating missing children and also combating human trafficking. So, Betty, first of all, thank you so much for being here and thank you from the bottom of our hearts for the work that you do. I'm so excited to have you tell everyone, give us a little bit about you and your background and what you're doing.
Sure. So I try to keep, how I got into this as short as possible because it's really kind of a long story. My sister and I actually kind of grew up in and out of foster care. And at 14, she became a victim of human trafficking. And so back then, it wasn't like even in law yet. And so, it wasn't talked about. And back then, it was, child prostitution, right? And so at 14 years old, she ended up being a victim and finally broke free at around 21. That obviously she went through a lot of, trauma and things that she was trying to, overcome. She was eventually able to. And then she started her nonprofit in 2015. And unfortunately, in September of 2015, she was murdered. And so since then, me and my team decided that, we can't let it end with that. And so we kind of took her dream and just ran with it ever since.
Wow, that's incredible. So you guys still work together?
Me and the team on the nonprofit side, we work together. And then, I have obviously my team with Valor Investigations, we work together.
Very cool. I'm going to go ahead and put your link in the comments here for people to check you out. So your website is valorpi.net. I'm going to display this as well so people can see. That's an incredible story. I think most of us who are in this realm of combating child trafficking, human trafficking, there's got to be some personal, I don't even want to say motive, but that passion comes from a very personal place that most of us have had a touch point with in some way or another. So I want to thank you guys for not only overcoming everything you've been through. I know that sounds strange, but people don't realize how pervasive human trafficking is in our country. I know there's a greater awareness now than there probably was back when your sister was experiencing that. And we're so grateful for that. Awareness is massive in terms of reducing the predator's ability to operate, but it also empowers survivors. It gives us a voice. It funds missions. It does a lot to do good. It also, hopefully, keeps people away from thinking this is all just a theory. Because I'm sure, as you probably experience as well, there's a lot of ignorance around this topic. There's also a lot of misinformation. I would venture to say it may even be intentional in terms of divisive and, distracting people from the actual core of the message, as well as what they can do to be part of the solution. So we can talk more about what's needed and what people need to know. But as a child trafficking survivor, I know that it's difficult work, not only to try to find these children, but just to be in this world. So if you would give us a little glimpse into, I don't know if it's a day in the life or the types of experiences you guys have today with the work that you do.
So I can give so many tons of examples. I'll take one that I'm working right now. So we have a 15-year-old missing little girl. She is a trafficking victim, confirmed. We've worked tirelessly with law enforcement on this case. We were able to actually get her trafficker arrested recently. The issue that we're having now is this child is still missing. And so we are, luckily we're able to kind of follow her and see these activities that are going on. We know she's likely fallen into the hands of another trafficker, but who was connected to the original one. And so now it's a matter of working our technology advances to try to pin down and exactly, we have a general area of where she's at. But it's really difficult, and it's very elusive, and they know how to try to hide their crimes. This is their career, and people don't understand like how big this really is, that they run this as if it's a business, like an enterprise. So just because we had him, he's now currently in jail but unfortunately, there was somebody else to step in and take his place, which continues to traffic this child. And we know with every hour that passes, this child is in danger. And it's not just from the trafficker. We have to watch out for the Johns because they are just as dangerous. You know, we've unfortunately been to more funerals than I want to go to because we've lost children, or in one case it was an 18-year-old. To me, that's still a child due to a John. So it's daily work. It's online, being online, having the online presence. It's being out there in these hotspots. Recently they shut down the infamous Bissonnette Street. And, the county thought or the city thought they were doing something there. And really, they kind of hurt our efforts because some of the children that we were looking for, that's where we can go. And we had these open investigations that we knew they would pop out there. And then now they've been moved. And so now we got to track down, like, which location are they at? We've got one over in Dallas now. And there's different pop-ups in Houston. So they didn't stop it with shutting down the street. What they did was they dispersed it. And so now we have to be on top of it and find out where they're at.
Yeah, man, there are so many aspects of this that the public doesn't comprehend. It's really not common knowledge. And again, I think that's partially by design. But in your experience, there's a lot of these, I don't even want to call them theatrical solutions. I'm a little sarcastic, unfortunately, about all of this, but there's a lot of action. Well, there are not enough actions taken, but sometimes actions are taken that may or may not actually be beneficial for the children, for the survivors, for people like you who are out there looking for the children, people like us that are trying to combat it, arrest the bad guys. There's all these laws and policies and things that, very nicely said, can sometimes be in our way. So would you speak to that? What's been helpful and what has not been helpful in recent years?
So for me, one thing very recently is they've made it a felony in Texas to purchase, they call it prostitution, but they've made it a felony. And so to me, that helps when it comes to the buyer's end of it. And, because there's more of a consequence. I mean, it used to be like, a misdemeanor and a ticket. Now it's a felony. I think them bringing in trafficking laws recently over the last years and really hammering down on those has been extremely helpful. Where we're running into a lot of the issues is we can gather tons of evidence and have proof, and but if a victim who's been abused and hurt and manipulated, and if a victim doesn't outcry, then the likelihood of us getting a conviction is almost zero. And so we see them release these traffickers back out just to re-victimize another child. And so, but they don't take into account that they're scared and they don't know what the consequences are going to be, and they've been threatened, and there's just they're not taking that into account. So if we don't have an outcry, it's almost as if they do nothing. So that's the biggest issue.
For those who don't know what an outcry is, can you explain what that is?
Sure. So an outcry is from a victim that will actually sit down and speak with law enforcement and give their story. And they have been taught and trained that if law enforcement gets involved, what they can and cannot say. And so, and it's beat into their heads. And so when law enforcement does get involved and they're just repeating and regurgitating what they were trained to say. And so to be able to get that, it's hard.
Oof. That's just one of so many details, but it's something that's important for people to know, because most people are not aware that, to your point, most victims are scripted. They are told what they can and cannot say. And realize, I'm just going to summarize this because it's actually a pretty extensive discussion. We see brainwashing today on adults. it is much easier even to overpower and outsmart a child. So when you are a child in a very controlled environment and the people are taking care of you and telling you that everyone else is unsafe, they're the only ones that are peace, love, happiness, protection, everybody else is bad, going to get bad things, they drill it into the child's head that, by the way, police are not safe, strangers are not safe, we're the only safety, protection, etc., either by grooming and coercion and or by violent, aggressive acts. So oversimplifying this so that people are clear that sometimes, while I hope that the people implementing these policies have the best of intentions, sometimes they don't really make sense in the real world. Because let's imagine what it would be like for a child to, first of all, survive the unimaginable and then be apprehended by police officers, which they're told are terrible people and they're going to hurt them and whatever else. For a child to tell a truthful, factual story is already pretty impressive in terms of requiring that of a child who is very severely victimized. We're using very soft wording for the sake of this platform, so I hope you guys can appreciate that. But there's just a lot we've seen that most people should never have to see. But that being said, if a child is essentially required to give the evidence that may or may not convict the predator, that's a lot of responsibility to place on a child. But then take into the consideration the amount of manipulation the child has also endured. So how sad, honestly, how very sad that that would be the criteria as to whether or not a trafficker may or may not get behind bars or stay behind bars.
Absolutely. I think we've got to do something different. We've got to change that. It's almost the best example I can give is like a domestic violence situation. And so, just as any abusive relationship, a woman will go back on average 7 times. We see that in trafficking victims, same thing. On average, they'll go back 7 times. However, if law enforcement is called and there's evidence and there's pictures, and even if the victim recuses her statement, takes it back, and in situations like that, the prosecution can move forward. So because we've pushed that on domestic violence, and I would like to see something very similar when it comes to trafficking of our children, so that way they don't need that statement. As long as the evidence is there, we can continue with the prosecution.
1000%. Again, it breaks my heart because knowing a small part of what a child may experience having going through all that trauma, but then being put there to essentially testify against your abuser and having that pressure and knowing the consequences that, quite frankly, a child may or may not be aware of this, but the system does not have the victim's back. The system is not designed to protect victims or survivors. They are not designed to keep them out of the trafficker's hands. They are not designed to help them redesign their life. Quick pop quiz, guys. Why is it that we have more shelters for animals than we do for survivors of human trafficking? I'm an animal lover and I'm not trying to put away those shelters. I'm just saying there is zero support for survivors as a whole. There are some spread out grants from individuals that are very difficult to apply for. There are some organizations collecting a lot of funds that don't actually house and shelter survivors. And we know this because...
Thank you. I wasn't even going to bring it up, but you did.
Oh, no, I go there. Yeah. I'm being nice about it, but look, look, the system is broken. We're laughing about it because sometimes that's all you can do. And because in completely different worlds, we've seen too much. It's not that this is a joke to us. It's that the system is so broken. The system is a joke. It is a joke. The predators are protected, unlike the survivors. So I'm going to get off my soapbox and let you keep going. But again, it's one of those things that people think is being handled. And instead of even being handled correctly, it's not being handled.
No, and I kind of want to touch base on something that you said, because for me, it's really important and it hits really, really close to my heart. There is not enough places for victims. There are a few and they're amazing, but there's just not enough. And then there's so many stipulations on those. If it is a child that actually has a family and has insurance, you're looking at $400 or $500 a day for them to stay there or more. I know because I've stepped in and I've helped pay for some of the victims we recovered, if they're children of the system, it can take. We fought for one child for 9 months solid to get her into one of those, and the whole time, like, she was going right back into trafficking. So there's not enough support. It's so important for the public to know that when they're donating to organizations, and for these big corporations, when they're coming down and they're donating to these organizations, know what those organizations do. Make them open up their books, because you could be donating to an awareness organization. I love awareness. Awareness is huge for me. But they're handing out pamphlets, but not truly going out, and there's no boots on the ground. They don't have a shelter or a safe place. And their presidents, or what CEOs, whatever you want to call them, are making $1 million a year based off of this money. So no, they have to open their books, know who you're donating to, know what their mission is, and know what they're actually doing, not what they claim to do, what they are actually doing.
Yes, absolutely. I just want to highlight everything you just said. This is an ongoing thing for those of us in this fight, where when someone needs protection, they need a place to stay. To her point, there are very few and far between facilities that are actually helpful and amazing. There are many that are, it's too nice to say, not helpful.
Mm-hmm.
There are some that are actually part of the problem. So this is actually a common pattern, and it's very unfortunate that a child is taken from an unsafe environment and placed into an equally or more unsafe environment. There have been terrible stories. So again, what we're doing here is discussing the reality of the situation in order to raise people's awareness, because we want you to make informed decisions, but we also want to make sure to quantify this issue, because a misunderstanding is that it's being handled. Oh, it's illegal, so therefore you can just go to the police and it'll all be taken care of. Oh, our government officials are totally on this, right? And, you know, there's shelters, there's government care. So please vet the organizations that you support. You could even maybe see if a survivor qualifies to be there before you donate, and just see what kind of response you get.
Yes, that. I had a victim, and I feel like if we were able to get her into the right position, she would be alive today. She was a child that we had recovered, and we reached out to multiple different places, and we pulled her back from the one that did agree to take her, because they had just come under investigation for re-victimizing victims. It was all over the news, and so we immediately kind of pulled her application. But that child ended up living with our families because there was nowhere for her to go. And when we thought we had a location, a safe location, and this home is a phenomenal home, and a safe home. And so the first thing they asked us, is there any behavioral or mental health problems? So of course, this is a traumatized child. And I mean, very traumatized. You know, I held this baby's hand through her SAN exam. This was very, very traumatic. And so, you know, being honest, I said, yes, she does. She's going through a lot. She needs a place to heal. And they declined her. Yeah.
Man. So let's unpack something else. Again, to us, sometimes these things are very obvious, but to the public, awareness does matter. I say this often too. Awareness is just step one. Awareness means acknowledgement. My house is on fire. That's acknowledgement. Step two is taking action.
Right.
Most people are not even on step one. A lot of people think this is a theory, and I think that's kind of, I'm going to sarcastically say, cute to you and I, but unfortunately for many of us, this is not a theory. And also, there's a big problem beyond the actual problem. The lack of support is pretty alarming, to say the least. So let's talk about the need for trauma-informed care and how difficult it is to find that. Now, what I mean by trauma-informed is that there are many amazing psychologists and therapists and people and counselors who are not uniquely qualified for helping survivors of human trafficking, and specifically, uniquely, child trafficking. So while I have the utmost of respect and appreciation for everybody who's doing their best to help, it's unfortunate that many people I know have been unable to find help and have been to multiple therapists in their adult years trying to overcome and heal from the traumatic experiences in their childhood. And they get blank stares, they get really ignorant questions, they get offensive remarks like, wow, I would be wanting to unalive myself as well.
Right.
There are there's an incredible lack of not only awareness, but trauma-informed practitioners or therapists or people that can actually help survivors. So to our earlier point, there's no government assistance for therapy, for medical care, for education, for housing, for childcare, or other basic human needs when you get out of a situation like human trafficking. We also covered the fact that there are little to no shelters or protection in terms of housing. But in addition, imagine, if you will, surviving the unimaginable, trying to figure out what normal is and whatever age you are, but trying to make arrangements. And imagine this being a child who may or may not have a family and or whose family is very dangerous. In addition to that, the type of rehabilitation is very difficult to find qualified support. So a positive thing is one of many things that I've been working on. I'm calling it Survivor Resources for now, but it is a network of trauma-informed therapists that can offer coaching and support to survivors. Now, most of my peers are already adults. Many of my peers are in their 50s. And yes, it is very difficult to overcome severe trauma even from their earlier childhood years. These symptoms persist. That being said, if you don't get the support and the healing in the community that can be so helpful in that healing journey, it's a very difficult process. So what I would love to see is support from our government, support from individuals who care to connect survivors to trauma-informed care. We're also working on medical care, education, and other basic needs. But therapy, we could break a lot of generational trauma cycles. We could help people redesign their lives. We could reinstill a sense of self-worth and value. It goes a long way, and people should know how hard it is to come by. So I want to acknowledge everything you guys are doing because there are so many limitations.
It is. And I speak, I wish she was here because she, my sister understood. She, like I said, she was a victim from 14 until 21. And when she passed away, she was 33. And even at 33 years old, because there wasn't enough help out there wasn't enough people that understood. She did, and I'm very open about her history, she did turn to drugs. She did turn to alcohol. When she passed away, that wasn't a factor. But, it took so long for her to be able to start to heal on her own because there just wasn't enough of the help and people who understood and that were experienced to help her. So the effects of our victims are a lifetime, whether they were trafficked a day, a month, a year, 5 years. It is a lifetime of trauma. And so if you meet a survivor like yourself, that's something that you still live with and something that still affects you, and you have to continuously heal. So that's never truly over for a survivor. And so it's kind of frustrating when I hear people say, oh, well, that happened years ago. Well, it sticks forever for the rest of the survivor's life.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm grateful that I'm uniquely positioned to be able to fight back and use my experiences to expose and eradicate this evil because I'm not afraid of it and because I've overcome it and because it's not okay with me that a lot of people are still unaware and calling this a theory and saying they care but doing nothing. That's my soapbox. That being said,
and they see it's kind of frustrating for me because I see TV shows and things, on TV and so they think, I'd actually talked to Craig earlier, when we had the show, and they think these girls are they have designer bags and they have their hair and makeup done and their nails done, and so it doesn't look like what they saw on TV. Mm-hmm. And like I said, this is them packaging their product. You know, of course the girls look beautiful and they have makeup and hair and nails because that's how they're packaging their product. And so when people see it on the outside, they're like, that can't be a trafficking victim because of how nice they look. Well, of course they do. It's a product.
Yeah, I have to laugh because people don't know what they don't know. And I'm very happy to hear that if someone has experienced nothing along the lines of this evil we're discussing, that's great, right? I have bless their hearts. But there's some ignorance is not bliss when it comes to this topic, because unfortunately, people pretending this doesn't exist is not helping children. People thinking it's only what they see in Hollywood and not what's happening right in front of them in their communities is not helping children. People saying they care, but not helping children is not helping children. So I could go on, but I do want to share a message that I especially want to impart to other survivors, even if you experience a different type of trauma. But we are talking about very severe childhood trauma. I believe healing is a choice. Now, we were just talking about the complexity of it, right? There is no finish line to healing. And it's also a very personal, very unique journey. I believe that you're the only one that can decide to heal and the extent to which you allow yourself to heal. Now, I am not saying it's easy. I'm not trying to make it sound, nope, absolutely not. But I know it is a choice. And I know that someone else can't heal you or make you heal. You have to be the one to decide you're ready and start taking those baby steps. Now, when you have a supportive community, when you have a therapist and counselors who can guide you on that path, it can be a lot easier, more straightforward, less heartbreaking, etc. But it's never an easy process. It's something most people don't understand. But your comments about, I'm smiling because I've heard things like this as well. Someone told me one time, and most of these are well-meaning individuals. So again, I have compassion. It's not offensive to me, but I do sometimes smile. I've heard things like, really, you're a survivor? You don't look like you've been hurt. You look fine.
It's so true, though. It's so true.
Yeah. Again, it's not offensive. I know they're genuinely thinking, like it's not what the movie said, or like you're not a malnourished, dirty child in chains in a cage. Like, I'm not even trying to make light of this situation, but there's a lot of lack of awareness surrounding this issue. And for people to think that just because a child is well groomed or has their nails done that they don't need help, like, I can't even begin to unpack that. But what we need people to know is that it's generally not what you think it looks like. It's generally not what you see in Hollywood. It's generally not going to be as obvious as you and I would like it to be.
Right.
That's why awareness is so important. And granted, those of us who have been trained and who have lived this experience can spot it out much easier than most people. But again, what we're aiming for with public awareness, we're not necessarily even asking you guys to be out here on the front lines with us, getting the bad guys and doing the dirty work. I understand not everyone can face that. We are asking you to be aware and to do something. I believe everyone can do something to be part of the solution, all of us in different ways. But if nothing else, if you, for whatever reason, if all you can do is have your head on a swivel, know what to look for, empower yourself, educate yourself with the signs of what human trafficking is, what you can do, use your best judgment. We have a lot of tools and education on our website. Betty, do you offer any kind of training or insight on this? We have some people asking in the comments how they can find out more and get training.
I'm trying to think of the website. I will post it on our website. There is, and it's actually offered as trauma-informed. It's a trauma-informed training that actually I took, and I guess I took it several years ago, so I don't remember the exact website, but it's offered by the government. And to even work with victims of trafficking, you actually have to have this training. And so, but it's a free training, and it also helps you, it goes through the steps on recognizing it. And it's actually really good because it shows how just normal everyday people can recognize trafficking. It's in plain sight. It's in right in front of, you can walk into Houston and be within 20 feet of a victim and not even know it. And so this training helps you kind of open your eyes and the awareness And for some reason, I cannot at this moment remember the name of it, but I will later. I'll post it on the website. I can send it to you, and you guys can post it. It's like
Yeah.
OVCC. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, like OVCC something training.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, please send it. We would love to post that. We have a lot of free tools and education on our website. It's v4cr.org for those who want to click the link in our bio or check it out. It's a lot of, what to look for, what to do, signs of child trafficking, what is grooming. We have one on there called Identifying Predators. There are 7 things to know about child predators. It goes without saying, though, that in these instances, there are a lot of variables. So one of the most complicated things about this whole issue is that it's not a one-size-fits-all problem.
Mm-mm.
Therefore, there is never a one-size-fits-all solution. So I could give you 100 specifics and I would still not be all-encompassing of every single variable in the way that this can happen, what it can look like, how it can work. So what we try to do is oversimplify and generalize the information so that it's as accurate and generally applicable as possible. But just realize that you would have to use your best judgment in every situation to see what course of action is best to take for that situation.
Right. Absolutely. And I'm glad you said that, because it's not a one size fits all in this. It changes. Every situation is unique and every situation is different.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people do ask, though, and I always want to, awareness is huge, but then taking action is even more important. So I always like to give people action steps. What do you think? What are some tips or some, again, just generally applicable strategies or resources that you would recommend for people to be aware and know how they might handle a situation?
I know that, everybody wants to say call law enforcement, and really, unfortunately for the general public, that's kind of the option that they have. But I would definitely say, just keep your eyes open, pay attention. If something seems off, it's better to report it than to ignore it. You just never know. I mean, that one report could save a life.
Yeah, 1,000%. So as a private investigator, I want you to maybe give us some tips on best practices or what's helpful when reporting. And I say this because we have a small investigations team with Veterans for Child Rescue. We have a group of volunteers and former federal investigators, and we do these investigations. Now, sometimes these tips and reports we get are like, I think my neighbor's trafficking kids. I'm really concerned. Please help.
Mm-hmm.
And there's really not much we can do with that information. So can you give some specifics that might be helpful?
Yeah. When you're reporting something like this to you guys, to somebody like me, to law enforcement, be mindful that the more information you give, the better. You want specific dates. You want, if you can snap a picture, maybe a license plate, if you're saying, your neighbor's trafficking children, can you set up a camera outside of your house? As much detail as absolute possible. I get people that reach out to me a lot and tell me, hey, my friend's cousin has a missing child. Can you help? And this is their name, and then they send me a flyer, and there's just not much I can do with that. So, as much detail, as much information as you can possibly get, and reach out, and we'll do the follow-up. We'll do the rest of the work, but we've got to have details. We've got to have a lot, and it can't be, well, I think, sure, hunches can be worked on, right? But it's got to have more fact basis behind it. And I sounds crazy, but I actually get crazy phone calls sometimes where people are mad at their ex-boyfriend or something. And, I get stuff like that. And so, don't waste our time. Just be specific. Let us know. We want to help. We want to end this. And so if you have something, please come with as many facts as you can get.
Yeah, very important, very helpful. I would love to know your perspective, because a question we also get a lot is, how would I be able to identify a child being trafficked or a child in harm's way? What should I look for and what should I do?
There's several different ways that you can identify it. as you said earlier, though, it's not one touch all. So, kind of overall, you're looking for possibly a child that is secluded. They're not going to look you in the eye, they're going to look away, they're going to be very reserved. They are, one thing I've noticed when I'm working on a victim is they tend to dart their eyes around a lot, because these predators are always watching them. So they're always over their back, even though you may not see them, they're there. And so they're constantly looking around and trying to see who's watching them. These are just small little things. When you hear of, a child saying that they, live on their own, they're 15 and they live on their own and things like this, that's like a red flag. So just, pay attention. Body language is key. Watch their body language, understand how fearful they are, even though what the words coming out of their mouth may not seem, but there's fear there. And if you pay attention, you'll see it.
1000%. I love that. Thank you. I want to run my response to that by you to see if you have any input, because I'm, in case we can upgrade this response. It's just a question I get a lot, and it's very difficult to give a general response to such a big question because there are so many variables. But I use the following hypothetical example of, most people in public would be likely to interface this kind of evil in a public setting. Maybe it's an airport or an amusement park or some sort of big crowded space. So again, there's a lot of variables, but I'm kind of narrowing it down to something more realistic that the public may encounter. The other difficulty is, of course, it's not going to be as obvious as people would like. So it's not going to be a, malnourished, dirty child, but generally you'll see something that's not quite right. Maybe you're at an airport and there's children or a group of children. They don't quite look like they belong with the adult or group of adults. Something's off. So that's an instinct. That's a gut instinct or an intuition that I ask people to listen to, because it's telling you something. And this is my general advice to people when I get that question. Play dumb and ask questions. So if I was at an airport and I saw something that's not right and I had a gut feeling, now granted, my spidey senses are a little more attuned than the average person, but what I would do is I would approach in a non-threatening way. I am playing dumb, and I would blah, blah, blah. I'm just a tourist. I'm like, oh, that's so cool. Where are you guys going? Blah, blah. What I'm doing is asking questions. I'm collecting data. I'm getting closer to them in a non-threatening way. I'm playing dumb and like, oh, where are you guys going? Oh, fun, blah, 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 blah. And I'm hoping to see their response, because in collecting data, what I'm doing is I'm monitoring the adults and the children, their body language, their response to me. Can the children answer for themselves in an age-appropriate way? Do they make eye contact or at least acknowledge me like a normal child? Are they fearful? Do they have fear in their eyes? To your point, that's a huge indicator. There's generally some sort of freeze. Are they scripted? Are their answers not normal for a child their age? Does it sound way too rehearsed and not quite right? Is the adult or parent, are they getting between me and the child? Are they not letting the child talk? Are they brushing the child away? Are they trying to get away with the child? Are they giving me scripted responses? So again, the body language, it's not as straightforward as we'd like it to be to give you like a 1, 2, 3 of this, but you're collecting data. You're also looking at what do they look like? What are they wearing? Maybe you can get some location information, or, hey, do they have small bags or big bags? Are they going international or domestic? Like, let's try to get some evidence here. Here's another thing that I tell people that is the most specific yet general that I can probably get in terms of what to look for. In addition to all of that, ask the child, if you can, something along the lines of, are you excited? The reason is, normally that's off script. Normally they don't have a scripted response for that, and it is very difficult for a child to fake excitement. So they'll have this, if they're being victimized, if something's really wrong, they're sort of like a shell on the inside. They have fear, and it's this whole thing. So if you ask them that, oh, that's so cool, you guys are going to the beach for summer. Oh, are you guys excited? If they sort of freak out or like look at the adult for like, what do I say? Or they just sort of, that's not normal. So again, it's very general, but this type of collecting of evidence is very helpful if and when you can turn around and report it. The more information, the more details, the more of a storyline you can give to the investigators, the more helpful it is, the more likely they will actually take action. So anything to add to that? Because I do get that question a lot.
No, I think that's great, and that's an amazing way for the public to help if they have a gut instinct or if they're suspicious of something. Because you're absolutely right. It's simply asking a child if they're excited is going to throw an off script. And in the meantime, you're getting a lot of details, because that adult that's with them is also kind of caught off guard. So they're trying to put themselves in between, you and them. And so I really love the example you gave. It's amazing. And I think, especially the way you worded it is perfect for the general public. So I love it.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. That's good to know. Always looking to improve and, get this message out to people in a better way. The other aspect of this that I like to unpack for people, and sometimes it takes a petite female with a big smile to say this to people's face. A lot of times I have met grown adults, grown men, who will look me in the face and say, I don't know what I would do if I saw a child being trafficked. I'd be scared. I don't know what to do. It's too scary. So to that, I say, in this hypothetical scenario that I just told you about, this is the worst case scenario. If you're wrong and nothing's wrong and everything's okay and they answer totally normal, maybe you'll be a little bit embarrassed or feel awkward. Like, that's worst case. I just want to lay that out in order to remove the fear excuse from like, I'm not judging people. I just want to make it very clear that to me, it is unacceptable for a grown adult to be too afraid to think about or to face a problem that a child is experiencing on a daily basis.
Absolutely.
It is not acceptable to me.
Absolutely. Beautifully stated, because at the end of the day, we are adults. And if you're afraid to confront something like that, like you said, this child is living that. This child is living that nightmare. So I would rather be wrong than never have taken the chance, and God forbid you see it on the news the next day, or maybe you never see it, but you now have to live with that you knew something. You see comments all the time where somebody says, I wonder whatever happened, or yeah, I wish I would have. And it's something as simple as having that conversation and approaching somebody, like you said, and to really get to the heart of it, because that could be a child's life on the line.
1000%. Absolutely. We're not asking anyone to be the hero or be a Rambo. We're literally asking you to play dumb and ask questions. And I think that's something anyone can do using their best judgment. I also want to drive this point home a little clearer, because you're in Houston, Texas. Is that right?
Yes.
That's awesome. So is it true that Houston, Texas, or Harris County is one of the epicenters of human trafficking in our nation?
I think it's number one for trafficking children, actually, in the United States. It is the hub. It is absolutely insane, the number of cases that come through Houston, and they're coming from all over the world. Mm-hmm. You have victims from every country that are children right here in the heart of Houston. So that's absolutely true. It is a war zone, and that's the way I look at it. It's a war zone out here. I spoke earlier about, we had one trafficker locked up, but he was just replaced immediately with another one. When we do find a child, all we're doing in their eyes is taking their products. Okay, we just got to restock, and so they just go out and get 2 or 3 more. So it's a vicious cycle. It is an absolute war out here. Houston is bottom of the barrel, and I'm honestly just disgusted the amount of trafficking that is happening here to our kids.
Yeah. I'm going to back up everything you're saying with a personal story. And then afterwards, I also want to talk about your experience with the district attorney and the elected officials in that county. And let's check in on what they're doing next. But first,
okay.
more. So for those who don't know, I was born and raised in this environment, and I escaped when I was 20 years old. I'm an American child. My family is from Texas. I was born in Brazil. I was raised mostly in Brazil and Mexico, in third world countries, for the majority of my childhood. Ironically, from the age of 10 to 14 years old, I was in Houston, Texas. So for 4 years of my childhood in Harris County, every single week, every weekend, I worked on the streets, in restaurants, in grocery stores, and shopping malls, and parking lots, at the George R. Brown Convention Center, at the Astrodome, at people's houses, and everywhere in between. During those 4 years, when I was 10 to 14 years old, unmistakably a child, not one adult, not one law enforcement officer, not one good Samaritan had the awareness to come up to a child and ask, "Are you okay? What are you doing here? Why are you by yourself on the streets? Why are you collecting money? What are you doing with the money? Where are your parents? Do you go to school? Where do you not? Where do you live?" Not one adult had that awareness. And that awareness could have changed a lot, not only for me, but for tens of thousands of my peers, for the tens of thousands of other children in our organization. Now, we are not asking, once again, anyone to be a Rambo or to go outside their comfort zone. We're asking you to simply be aware, collect evidence, and report it. We're asking you to do something. If that's all you can do, we're asking you not to look the other way, not to walk on by. If you can't be on the front lines like us, we're asking you to do something to support, because this fight is massive. 1 child, 10 children, 100 children, 1,000 children are too many. The truth is that no one knows the real numbers, because the statistics are just based on what's reported. The majority of this is not reported, and even if it is, it's not always collected into the data. That being said, myself and the tens of thousands of other children that I was born and raised with, we were never rescued. We were never part of those statistics. I know for a fact that statistics are barely scratching the tip of the iceberg.
Barely.
So to me, it's not that it doesn't matter. It's that it's not about whether it's 100,000 or a million or 100 million. 100 is too many. 1 is too many. And real quick, before we move on to the elected officials, because we're going to hold everyone who should be talking about this accountable, wouldn't it be weird if 100 children a year in the USA were being trafficked and the media wasn't talking about it? Wouldn't that be weird? I'm going to be sarcastic because I want people to unpack this logic. If we had 100 children a year go missing and being trafficked in the USA, that would be unacceptable for the media not to talk about it, correct? Yeah, so we're not going to ask the rhetorical question as to why they're silent about it, but I do want to draw to people's attention the fact that there is intentional opposition. So next, let's segue into the district attorney and the judicial system, whatever you'd like to unpack about the support or lack thereof that you experience in Harris County.
Oh, I'm gonna get some backlash. I don't even care. So the Harris County, I will say on the federal side, I can honestly say I'm very impressed. Their hearts are in it. They're fighting the good fight. They are pushing for the stronger sentences. We did have an issue recently where a federal judge gave a trafficker less than the minimum. It was aggravating for us, but we know that those detectives and those involved in that prosecution really put forth the effort and they fought. What we see on just the county side, though, I don't even know what they're doing. I always pray that when we have a predator and we have a trafficker, like I pray it goes federal, because at least then we know that there's going to be some justice. When we see it on the Harris County side, there's a particular instance that we have where they completely dropped the charges on a trafficker, and I see he's still trafficking children. Finally got the charges pressed, finally got him in jail, and then Harris County dropped the charges because they didn't have the victim. Well, let me tell you about that victim. She's been missing for 4 years. We don't know where she is. I've worked the case in and out. She has a devastated family, and it's 4 years. This child is still gone, and there is absolutely no signs of life. But because we don't have a victim, right? They've dropped the charges. He's out and he's free and he's victimizing more children. Of course, we don't have her. Um, well, why should that stop? That to me, that's more of a reason to prosecute, right? But instead, they drop the charges. We have where multiple traffickers, and it's actually made the news, and people can look it up, where they're getting out on these super, super low bonds. And they have means. I mean, they're making tons of money here. Okay, like they have means, so they're getting out on low bonds, and then they just disappear. They don't go back to court. Like, I mean, it is absolutely horrendous what I see Harris County doing to these traffickers, which is next to nothing. We did get one finally prosecuted in Harris County. He ended up with 15 years, but we're talking 7 victims. We're talking another child completely missing off the face of the planet. And his total sentence is 15 years. He'll get out. He has to serve 80% of that time, so he'll end up out soon and just right back out to where he was.
15 years for 7 known victims, destroying their life, the lives of 7 souls.
Yes.
And you get about 2 years and something per soul.
Yes. And then we see, when Bissonnette was active, again, Bissonnette's still active. It's just not on Bissonnette. Okay. So when Bissonnette was active, you would see cops drive by, and I recovered a 12-year-old little girl out there, and she had been working out there for 2 weeks by the time we got the case. And, cops literally that night that we recovered her, we watched probably 3 patrol officers drive by. And this is a 12-year-old child. So they actually drove by her multiple times. And so they were, that's their beat. And they're, I was like, why are they not educated? Why aren't we having some kind of a meeting every day if that's their territory, their beat, saying, hey, we have these missing children and we think they could possibly be here. Keep your eyes open. Are those meetings not happening? I watched 3 cops drive by this 12-year-old, and then it took me 3 hours to get the cops out there to respond. Yet I'm watching them drive by. So, it's things like this that we see in Harris County that I don't know if you can tell, like, I'm furious about it. I'm so disappointed. Do better. Y'all got on the TV and was like so excited to talk about how you shut down Bissonnette. But
how it actually solved.
Yeah.
Those types of band-aid approaches are all too common, unfortunately. But, to law enforcement officers' credit, because I know for a fact that the majority, most if not all, are, understaffed, under-resources, and specifically are not trained in human trafficking interdiction. So I have massive respect for them, of course, and I understand that they are already overtasked. So it shouldn't necessarily fall on them completely, but
it's the lack of leadership.
Absolutely. They should have some level of training. And I know the law enforcement officers that I've talked to all want it. They want it. Some of them pay for it themselves, where they go get training because they see this and they don't know what to do, or they don't have a protocol. I've talked to law enforcement officers that made a traffic stop and, something wasn't right, and they uncovered 20 kids in the back of a van, and they don't have a protocol for what to do. So it's heartbreaking, but
I've never met an officer once that didn't care. The issue that we're having is coming from the top.
Yeah.
Every mayor, the top, okay, because I could call them out, but I mean, it's the top. And you're understaffing our law enforcement, and then we wonder why. I think, if I'm not mistaken, there's like 7 detectives. It's either 7 or 8 detectives for Harris County for missing people. And there's thousands of cases. So it's not the lack of them trying by any means.
No,
It's the lack of having the support. It's the lack of having the funds. It's a,
yeah. Here's a rhetorical question that I ask people often, because again, law enforcement officers should be trained, but here's the rhetorical question. First, let's quantify it. Human trafficking is the second largest criminal enterprise on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about the sale and exploitation of humans. Child trafficking, the sale and exploitation of children, is estimated to be at least a $50 billion per year criminal enterprise in the USA, based on statistics, which is based on the tip of the iceberg. So
I think that's a low number.
Absolutely, that's a low number. That's what's reported. That's what's quantified. Okay. So let's just stick with that though. $50 billion a year, that's more annual revenue than all professional sports combined. All the merchandise, the games, the events, all the things generate less annual revenue than the sale and exploitation of children in the USA.
Mm-hmm.
The rhetorical question then is, why does our federal government not have a dedicated task force or agency that's focused on combating human trafficking?
Well, you said it.
It's a
For me,
question.
you said it.
How would you state the obvious? Put you on the spot.
For me, you said it. You're talking $50 billion. It's money. You literally gave the answer.
Exactly.
That's why. Yeah. And no matter which way you look at it, it's money.
Absolutely. And
they're complicit.
It's important for people to understand, first of all, this is real, this is not a theory. Second of all, this is an intentional problem. Now, yes, the sale and exploitation of human beings has happened for many millennia, but it is intentional, meaning this criminal enterprise, this organized, well-oiled machine, this $50 billion at least annual criminal enterprise revenue, all of this is protected, supported, and funded. All of this receives a lot of top cover. And by design, there is not a targeted force to combat it. So sometimes law enforcement officers step in when they're called to, when they find it, when they encounter it, sometimes Homeland Security, private investigators like you. There's people who care and who are trying, but at the leadership level, there's intentionally not an effort to protect children. Now, I'm saying this calmly, but none of us should be okay with this. None of us should be okay with the fact that our elected officials, I'm going to say this sarcastically, are too busy to protect children. None of us should be okay with the fact that our tax dollars are not being used to protect children. None of us should be okay with the fact that law enforcement officers don't even receive the training that they're asking for, the budget, the resources, or otherwise, to be able to combat this. None of us should be okay with the fact that children are being hunted and targeted and that our elected officials are not even bothering to prosecute these predators or protect and safeguard the victims. It's should be a very alarming reality. But again, part of awareness is getting people to really face this for what it is, not what they want it to be, not what the law said it should be. Like, yes, it's illegal. It's still happening. And just because you can implement new policies, new laws, new legislation to make it more illegal, the sarcastic laugh is that if you don't have leadership and district attorneys and attorney generals who will enforce the law, then those papers are pretty much invalid. So all that to say, we're up against quite a difficult, complicated fight here, to say the very least. Has there been more in the way of intentional opposition? What else do you guys encounter that you want people to know about?
I think we touched base on a lot of it, meaning, there's not enough help out there. There's just not enough help. There's not enough safe places. There's not enough law enforcement support. There's no government support. I mean, hang that up. It's a systematic issue. I know people hear that a lot, but it's really honestly a systematic issue. when I always say this, like when we recover a child, for me, that's the easy part. Um, that's the easy part. I can recover children all day long. The hard part comes after, getting them the right help and getting them in the places that they should go, and really just helping heal them. That is almost, it feels like it's next to impossible. I mean, doors get slammed in your face, and um, I stayed up for days and days on end making phone call after phone call after phone call, and to call this hotline just to call this hotline, and then do this and then do that, and it is insane what there's. And I hate when you go to trained officials and you ask them, oh, what's your protocol? They give you this pretty little protocol, and it's like, oh, well, they're doing great until it actually happens, until you're actually the one making those phone calls, until you're the actual one with that child, and you're trying to make that work. So it is so heartbreaking. I can't tell you how many times I've cried and I've screamed, and because it is so, so hard. And then meanwhile, you have this child next to you that doesn't know what's going to happen next. You may have just saved them from a trafficker, but because of the way the system works, you may have just put them in a worse situation, and it's not right.
No, it's not. It would, I mean, heroes like you are so needed, and I know it's so difficult. I mean, as strong as even the strongest person, it's not something you can really train for, to handle the type of, not only witnessing all the trauma and what the victims go through, but the corruption, the doors being slammed in your face, the amount of resources and organizations and people that are positioned to help and say they help and don't, and then all the other levels of corruption. Again, it's something I wouldn't wish on anyone fully understanding, but it's something people need to be aware of, because it's one of the many things that is so broken about the system and intentionally designed to fail.
It
So
is. We even on the nonprofit side, there's, and I won't name them, but there's one nonprofit in particular that said that they house victims and survivors, and so we reached out to them, and uh, their way of housing was they offered us a $25 Walmart gift card. That was them housing, and then they said that, oh, I was like, really? And then, but you say that you do this, and they said, well, we can provide one night at the Red Roof Inn. That's their way of housing, but they're getting millions of dollars a year in government grants because they're housing, right? Just pay attention. Pay attention to what you're donating to.
Yeah, absolutely. Breaks my heart for so many reasons, but also because, those who aren't directly interfacing with this, a lot of people think, oh, well, there are grants. Yeah, but there are shelters. Yeah, but their government's helping. I hate to even call it theatrics because it's not a joke to me, but like, it is disgusting how much misappropriated support there is. So my call to action to each individual, and this is not necessarily, to be the bearer of bad news, but it is up to we the people to do something to not only change the culture, which is more of a long-term strategy, but to protect children, to be their voice, to be on the lookout for them, to advocate for them, to be that, maybe that one strong person, that one advocate in their entire life. And again, thank you for you and your team's tireless dedication. It's coming from a place of knowing how difficult it is and also knowing how needed it is. So I hope there will be more people like you that can actually help in some way. But I definitely hope that from a leadership standpoint, our government, our society, our system is changed in order to safeguard children and actually make our country safe for children.
I agree. And thank you guys for everything you guys do. I absolutely adore y'all, watch y'all. I love what y'all do. So thank you.
Absolutely. We appreciate you so much. Please tell people where they can find you. We have your website here posted in the comment, but for people to help you, for people to donate and support, where can people find you and get involved?
We actually have a donation link on our website, and it is so when you click on it, it put you to NMA, which is the nonprofit side of what we're doing. So, it is tax deductible for anybody that wants to donate. Every single penny, our books are open. Every single penny goes back into finding and recovering missing children. And that includes getting them clothes, because a lot of times they don't have anything. So that get clothes, hygiene products, making sure they're safe and they have an actual safe place. So that's all found on our website at valorpi.net. You can also follow us on Facebook at Valor Investigations.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Gail is asking, it's a good question, who takes the children once you find them? I know we talked about rehabilitation and aftercare, but do you guys have contacts for where to place children?
We do have contacts, and they don't always work out. So unfortunately, it kind of depends. If they are children that have a family, they have to go back to their family. But we stay and we support the family. And I don't have one survivor that I found that I'm still not to this day in contact with their family, and continuing to push resources and trauma therapy and things of that nature to get them the correct help. Children that are, unfortunately, a lot of the kids we get are children of the system. And so the only thing we can do is hand them to law enforcement. They'll go through there's a process, so it's long to talk about, but they'll go through the process and then likely placed back into one of the CPS facilities, unfortunately. And then now it's up to us to advocate and fight for them to get them into one of these, I say safe homes, but really they're therapeutic homes. I'm not talking about a behavioral health. I'm talking about a true like safe therapeutic home. And like I had said earlier, it took us like 8 to 9 months to get one child in there, but we continue to advocate and we continue to fight for them. We stay on those CPS calls. We stay on that caseworker. We don't back off until we can get them there. It's just, unfortunately, a process. There's no place that I know of that we can get them and put them immediately there, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's an honest answer. And again, it's another aspect, another layer of this that people don't understand. It's complicated. There's so much we need to fix, but we got to start somewhere. Like, I'm sure you and I understand, and those of us who know, yes, this is a massive problem. Yes, any good we do, it is a drop in the bucket. But
Yes.
what making a difference for one child matters. 10 children, 100 children, that matters. We're not going to get quieter about this. We need more people to join us in this fight. So we're not backing down just because there's an insurmountable odd here. We should, however, be standing together united on this topic. What better cause than standing together to protect children? What else could be more uniting in terms of us putting our differences aside and coming together to actually plant our flag on this hill and say, oh, here's a line in the sand. We can disagree about other things, but protecting children is non-negotiable. We are not afraid to talk about it. We are not worried that someone's going to call us a conspiracy theorist or say that no. We are confidently and unitedly standing together on this front because we simply must. And because if not us, then who? To me, and I'm sure to you as well, it's unacceptable that our elected officials are not taking action. It's unacceptable that the media is silent about this. To me, as a survivor, it's unacceptable that most churches are silent about this. It is up to we the people to change our culture, but it starts with each one of us. And it does start at home. As I'm sure you can agree, a lot of children that suffer trauma later on in life, a lot of it can start at home, even if nothing else, from a family member, a friend. That type of trauma can affect children throughout their lives. So if all you can do is protect your children, monitor their internet activity, safeguard them, implement boundaries, ask them questions, and listen, full stop. Listen, observe their behavioral changes, be that strong advocate for them, that matters. So I want to thank you again for your time tonight. I really enjoyed this discussion. And if you have any last words for our audience, I know everyone really benefited from this conversation. So thank you again for what you're doing.
Thank you, guys.
Absolutely. Thank you for everything you do. We look forward to having you back. We also had her recently on our radio show, Defending Our Children. I'm not sure if that episode is already out, but it's on our website, Veterans for Child Rescue /radio. I'll put it here in the comments for everyone. Thank you again, though, for everything you're doing. And I look forward to seeing you again soon, Betty. Thank you.
We'll talk soon. Thank you.
Thanks, you guys. Thanks for watching. Have a great night.